Sometimes in life we realize the path we're on no longer leads to the destination we planned on reaching. Other times the path may lead to the right destination, but we have an obstruction that forces a detour. In any case, the flexibility to pivot, adapt, and overcome is one major attribute of humankind that has allowed us to sail the seven seas, discover vaccines, and land on the surface of Mars. What does it take to become good at pivoting? And are there psychological hangovers that can stifle our flexibility? We're going to talk about that and more right now. Hi, you're listening to The Fight Coach, The Psychotherapist, and the Gym Momma. FCPGM is a weekly podcast where we discuss important topics that affect you and your family and tips we suggest that might just help you out. On today's episode, we're discussing adaptability and the ability to flip the script to get to the places you want to go. As per usual, I'm joined by James White of API Clinics, a psychotherapist well versed in the world of mental health, stress management, and anxiety.
How's it going?
Marlene Griffin, aka the Gym Momma, a parent of three, owner-manager of a busy martial arts and fitness gym, and a lifelong martial artist.
Hi there.
My name is Liam O'Griffin. I'm a professional MMA coach with a background in e-learning and engineering. If you'd like to follow along with us using our show notes, you can get them at www.fcpgm.com. There you'll find links to our show notes, our Facebook community page, our Twitter feed, and our Discord server. If you'd like to join the conversation and add your experience and feedback, we'd love to hear from you. So, let's begin. Okay, so we're talking today about the topic of pivoting, and just before we got on air, Aisling was asking, was it the pivoting from Friends? And I know you guys haven't heard this, but this is what she's talking about.
I just don't think it's gonna fit.
Oh yeah, well come on, up. Yes! Here we go, pivot! 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 Pivot!
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Alright, so it's not exactly that type of pivoting. It's not about moving furniture. It's about more or less kind of adapting and overcoming and stuff like that. So Mar is going to give us the background about pivoting and what we're going to be discussing in today's episode. So take it away, Mar.
Okay, so pivoting, it's actually a fabulous word. I found it, sometimes people can think of it negatively, but I found it very powerful. So to pivot is to rotate, turn, or spin. So you turn or rotate your a basketballer. Here he is, he's dribbling the ball, and he's rotating it to protect the ball. If you're a fighter, you're gonna pivot off your front foot. What did you say it was? It was so that you could change the angle or exit. So that's good. Pivoting is also about changing your outlook on life. So it's about kind of maybe reassessing how you feel and making changes there to enhance your life. And the last one would be like pivoting in business. It's changing the direction of the business. And the whole aim of pivoting, it's all about making an improvement. So you improve your position in fighting, you improve your revenue in business, or you improve your career or your outlook in life. So it's a very positive word, and it can be done on a small scale, or it can be done on a very big scale. So I suppose pivoting is about rotating, and it's about creating opportunities to expand money, personal features, or your career. So great topic.
Yeah, so it's a big topic that we will get into. We'll break it down a little bit more. And just to put listeners or viewers' minds to ease, I know I have my sexy voice on, but it's definitely not COVID. I've been tested. It's just a head cold, and I should be back to normal next week. Just before we do get into it...
I like your sexy voice.
Well, just before we do get into it, I want to give the listeners and the viewers a chance to maybe kind of give us a hand out a little bit. We do have this podcast that goes live on Spotify, Apple, all the podcasting apps. It goes live on YouTube as well. So one thing that listeners can do to support us would be to leave us a rating. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts if that's where you're listening from, and there's a chance there to leave a 5-star rating. It doesn't work with any other stars. You just have to hit the 5, right?
Why would they go any other stars?
So that would be great if you are listening on Apple. Then that would be a real help to us. If you're not listening on Apple, then you can leave a rating on a generic podcast app called podchaser.com, and then that filters through to all the rest of them. So podchaser.com. You could leave us a review there. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button on the episode. Drop us a comment, because engagement always helps with the algorithm. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so that you get notified of new videos as they come out. And we are back on a schedule to be releasing our episodes every Saturday at noon. So if you're not subscribed, then that's when you go and check. But if you are subscribed, then you'll get a notification and you won't even need to check. So there you go. You can help us out by leaving us a review, or by hitting the like and subscribe on YouTube. So we've kind of covered the definition, and we are going to go towards historical pivots. So Jimmy, you're going to give us an example of a famous person who has made some pivots, and maybe we can take inspiration from them. So who have you got?
So Arnold Schwarzenegger. So obviously we remember him when he was the bodybuilder and Mr. World and whatever. And then he transitioned into films and cinema. And then he transitioned into politics. So he actually pivoted a couple of times and has transitioned back and pivoted back into films again. In 2019, he did that.
The Expendables,
the Terminator one or whatever it's called.
Oh,
Dark Fate or something, yeah?
Yeah.
And he's amassed a fortune doing it. Do you know what I mean? So he had the drive and he had the motivation and determination. And when he came to the point, say in his Mr. World career, that he needed to move on to something else, he chose the movie industry and then transitioned into that and seen him explode from there.
And they weren't exactly
they're not
natural.
No.
Yeah, they're
and
not
the
natural.
Politics one thing wasn't, definitely, like.
Yeah.
You know? And he was very successful as being governor, like, for the amount of years he was there, from 2003 to 2011.
So we'll be talking a little bit like throughout this episode as to possibly why he chose those different areas, and then how did he become successful in those different areas, and maybe there's something we can learn from there. But there's definitely no link between bodybuilding and politics.
No.
Like, I can't think of another bodybuilder who became a politician, or even a celebrity who became a movie star who became a politician. I know, was it Richard Nixon or
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan? Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah. But I think
But you
that
had
we
Taylor Ortiz try to transition into politics, but it isn't going well from like.
Yeah, but then he's just got a very low IQ, so...
But I think that we pivot on a daily basis. Do you know what I mean? You could get up this morning and you could plan your day, and suddenly something else needs to be done, or there's a better way of doing it, and that's pivoting. So, like, pivoting is it doesn't have to be a massive thing. It can be a small thing as well. So, we're all well used to pivoting. We just probably don't realize the value of it. And I suppose that's what I found very interesting about this podcast, that we can actually see that it's a necessary thing to do on a daily basis.
So you were going to talk about pivots in business. Have you got an example of
I found loads. A couple of them are really, really exciting. So you have like Nintendo. Like, Nintendo is a company out since the early 1900s, and it started off like as being one of the biggest card seller companies in Japan. They dabbled in taxi service, vacuum manufacturing, vacuum cleaner, I should say. They had a hotel brand called the Love Nest Hotels. So they had those.
Could you rent those by the hour, is it?
So, like, it was in 1980 that they did, like, so they've pivoted all these times trying to keep, I suppose, the business turning over, the change of what was needed to keep their manufacturing up. And in 1980 was when they pivoted into the game world. So at that point then they had, you know, those games like Mario and Donkey Kong and all that. And like in 1918 they 81 no 18 what is it 2018 1918 was sounded wrong, but 2018 they actually had 10 billion dollar profits. So like they've stayed relevant for the whole century due to their ability to pivot. One of the other ones that was interesting is a funny story with it. Like everybody knows Twitter. Twitter started off as actually a platform for a podcast. And then when the Apple iTunes came in, they traded under Odia and they became obsolete once the Apple iTunes came in. And what happened was that they got all the employees together and they said, you have 2 weeks to come up with a business or else we're all out of work. And there was a guy called Jack Dorsey and he said, how about we have a place where people can share their status? And now we all know Twitter. I need to tell you no more about that. The other one I thought was funny was there was a company called Kuto. And what they were doing was they were actually, they had this kind of squishy stuff that we now know as Play-Doh. And what it was that that was invented back in the time when we all had coal heaters, and it was for cleaning the black that's off the wall, the residue from the coal off the wall. And then their business became slow because people started using gas, so then they wasn't necessary. And somebody heard of some school teacher using it in an arts and crafts. So they rebranded their whole thing, and that's why it's called Play-Doh. And now like 2 billion cans of Play-Doh are distributed throughout the world regularly. Like, so it's a great story. And then that led me to you know the way I love reading, and I love where the reading brings us. And it's great then when you chat about things and everything starts coming into, kind of maybe one bit like a jigsaw puzzle, everything starts coming together. And I was reading the most amazing book by a guy called Will Page. He's Tarzan Economics, and I love it for last week's subject and this week's subject because it's very visual of now pivoting, because here you are, you're Tarzan on the vines, and to get to places you have to change vines. So this is pivoting and learning where the right vine to go to the right place, and sure you might end up in the wrong direction, but you have a way of coming back again. And his book, it's a book about the 8 principles of pivoting, and like the knowledge on there is absolutely fabulous, because he would have studied the music business, where it went from huge success and then fell. And then, it had to reinvent itself when music was going on to Spotify. And he actually is the chief economist for Spotify. So definitely, we're going to have a link on the show notes. But I would really urge people to kind of read this book, because definitely if this is something that you like about pivoting in economics, this is a superb book. So you can get it, and you can help us out then as well, isn't it? We might get a cent or two.
We might get 3 cents, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But
so if you're going to buy the book, if you're going to buy any of the books that we talk about, if you use the link in our show notes, then that's an affiliate link, and so it won't cost you anything extra to buy the book, but 3 cents of it goes to us, and we can have a party with that.
Yeah, definitely.
We might be able to buy like a bit of a Twix or something. Or
Depends on how many of them buy the book.
Yeah, make it a whole Twix. So, of famous people pivoting, I'm going to talk about somebody in the fight business, and one named Chael Sonnen. So, if anybody is an MMA fan, you will know of Chael Sonnen. But just to give a little bit of a background on Chael started as a kind of as a wrestler, as a collegiate wrestler. He trained under Matt Linden, who was also a famous UFC fighter, and in 2006 and 2007, he had his run in the UFC, and he lost 2 fights, won 1 fight, and at that stage, he was 16-8. So that means he had 16 wins, 8 losses, 1 draw. He was cut from the UFC. Now, at that stage of your career, if you're 16-8 and you're cut from the UFC, the likelihood of getting back to the UFC is very, very slim. Many fighters get 1 run in the UFC. It's rare that somebody gets picked up again at a later stage. And at the time, Sonnen was just one of these kind of guys that was part of the background. He was like a wallflower. He was just unknown. Nothing really stood out about him. Nothing really spectacular about his style, his personality. He was very, very much a kind of a humble martial artist. And he went off into the sunset. Most people thought we'd never hear about him again. He ended up on a show called Bodog Fight, which was set up by a billionaire playboy, kind of like Hugh
Hefner.
Hugh Hefner, kind of like that. Yeah, Hugh Hefner kind of guy, and he was an MMA fan, and instead of actually buying a front row seat to the UFC, he just went over the top and set up a fight organization on the beach. So the cage was on the beach, or the boxing ring. They fought in the boxing ring back then. He had all sorts of pin-up models walking around in bikinis. He had all the celebrities from the old school days of MMA, like Hoist Gracie and all these guys. And then he would fly in fighters from all over the world and just have them fight for his own pleasure. It was literally a Playboy Mansion type of character or type of situation. And from there, Sonnen won 4 fights, got back into the WEC, which had just been bought by the UFC, and it was almost like a feeder show to the UFC. So it was kind of like a second division. He had a bunch of fights on there, and discovered his new character. And his new character wasn't Chael Sonnen; it was Chael P. Sonnen, the American gangster. And he started to feed off of one of his other passions, which was pro wrestling. And there's a very, very good article from a guy, hold on, let me get the name of the guy who's written. So Jonathan Snowden of the Bleacher Report. So the Bleacher Report is a very good website that has lots of articles on sports topics. And Jonathan Snowden has the A to Z on Chael Sonnen, 26 things you need to know about the UFC 148 contender. So this was written back a good few years ago, but it's still relevant. And on that, there's a reference to when he switched, when he pivoted, exactly when he pivoted, because he knew that his first run in the UFC was unceremonious. He won a couple, lost a couple, got cut, and that was the end of him. Not this time. So on this time, he pivoted, and so let me just get the quote there. So his coach, Matt Linden, told Bleacher Report, coming from a wrestling background, he tried to take a more humble approach. Over the last couple of years, he's taken a little different approach. Whether they hate him or they love him, they know who he is. They want to see him fight either way. I think it's important that he learned how to do that. This is what it takes in the industry. It's an entertainment industry. The promoters decide which fights are going to sell more tickets, and those are the fights they put together. It's about building hype and putting on a show. So he went from being the kind of humble wrestler that just says, thank you, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, I'll fight whoever you put in front of me, to absolutely calling the shots and becoming the American gangster. So just to give you an example of a post-fight interview. Now, take this now as the shyest guy in the room, and then suddenly this is the first time we see the character Chael P. Sonnen, and Joe Rogan is interviewing him after a fight, and he says, hold on. Joe Rogan, tonight is not about questions from me. I want to know how you feel being inches away from greatness. I want you to tell everybody how it feels. Are you not mesmerized? Do you not have chills for the first time on Fox for you to be here holding Chael's microphone, interviewing Chael? And while you're thinking about that, remember this. When you're the greatest fighter in the world today, they have a name for you. They don't call you a great fighter. They call you Chael Sonnen. Beat me if you can. And he just walked off into the sunset. And that character was what led him to having 2 fights with Anderson Silva, challenging for the title, having an epic saga with Vanderlei Silva. He went on to a life of politics, and he actually had lots of different brushes with the law, in that he was suspended for taking PEDs. He was arrested for money laundering and tax evasion. And his answer for when people asked him about his political career and why it ended, he said, "I left the political life the only way one should, in handcuffs." And so, like, this is somebody, like, from somebody who was just, as I say, a wallflower, to being one of the most infamous names in modern UFC history, a Hall of Famer, somebody who's made a fortune. He talks about growing up on the mean streets of Lynn, Oregon. And for those of us that don't live in Oregon, it's basically Montanati. Like, he grew up in the posh part of Oregon, but he makes it sound as though he was a gangster and that he had a hard life and this, that, and the other. It's all hype. But the pivot was that he realized that as a prize fighter, hype was the only way for him to make his fortune. And he went from being shy and humble to being Chael Sonnen, the American gangster. And it was one of the greatest pivots in MMA history.
Cool.
It's really, really cool how people pivot, you know, because I think that sometimes people think that when you pivot that you're giving up on your dream or you're changing, but actually it's about actually success and, you know, really grabbing your dream and doing anything to get there. So I think it's very exciting, pivoting.
So we're going to talk next about the psychology of pivoting. So obviously that's not going to be me talking about that. So Jimmy is going to take the lead on this particular one. So what's involved in pivoting and what's going on in the head?
So because pivoting is effectively change, or another way of saying it would be changing something, it can end up creating a lot of, from a mental point of view in your brain as a person, common feelings like anxiety, fear of failure, disappointment, sadness and stuff like that. However, there's also positive connotations out of it that it can create if you actually embrace it and start moving towards it and start doing the pivot, which then will bring in feelings of, say, excitement, anticipation, openness, all that type of stuff. But we can also look at it from, when we're looking at the mind from my perspective, we can look at the pivot point. And when we talk about the pivot point, it's that point where we either take control of our mind and our thinking and our planning or whatever, or lose control and allow ourselves to go into maybe depression or whatever the case may be. So when we lose control, it means we're giving up. And like you were saying, pivoting isn't about giving up. It's about just changing. It's about taking more beneficial decisions and reaping the rewards for ourselves. And that doesn't matter whether it's in life, whether it's in business, whatever it is, or whether it's just today, I was going to go and get lunch on my own, and now actually I'm going to go meet my friend for coffee. Do you know what I mean? It depends on you. And there's a doctor out there, Dr Sarah Sarkis, and she tells us that one of the powers we have as humans is that we have this clunky, unsophisticated but complicated, powerful advantage over every other animal, and that's our brain, which we've talked about here all the time in the show, and specifically the cerebral cortex, which is sort of in the prefrontal cortex area, and that allows us to be able to think and respond and reflect and use our logic and powers of decision and choice. It also allows us to ponder our existence. It also allows us to think about big ideas. Again, pivoting in business or pivoting and changing your direction in your life might be a big idea. It allows us to dream, to wish, to hope. But it also has the power, like a rogue, to take us down into those dark, dark places. So it's how we use, this part of our brain. It's going to determine the consequences that we come out on the other side. There was an article. Actually, we can put her article in there. It's called The Article on Pivoting in the Face of Life Challenges. We'll put that in the show notes. But there's other things when I was researching on it, specifically around business, the business end of it. And whether we're creating, changing, pivoting, or running a business, there's a massive psychological impact on us individually. And recent studies, the most recent studies have shown that 72% of entrepreneurs are directly or indirectly affected by mental health issues. 72%
Wow.
of entrepreneurs, whereas in the rest of the world, as in workers, employees, or whatever, only 48%. So it's actually higher for entrepreneurs.
What would that, what would that mean? Like, what is that? Is that a good thing? So that that makes them an entrepreneur. That
So
they
the
have.
studies look into it and say, yeah, it's about the drive, it's about the motivation, it's about the quick fix, but the mental health aspect of it is about the stress. So they're not sleeping enough, they're overthinking, all of these things that even if we aren't in business are hard anyway, but then having a business and having to, fulfill their dream or fulfill their goal or fulfill their market challenge or whatever it is, it adds that extra layer of stress. But I just looked at one, there's loads of stories out there, but there's a guy called Dan Murray Serter, and he's the founder of a new company called Heights, okay? And he openly talks about his mental health issues. And basically what he said is, in 9 years of being in business, he's failed 4 times and only had 2 successes. But during the whole time of these 9 years of being an entrepreneur, he suffered from 3 major health problems. The first one was burnout. The second one was chronic anxiety. And the third one was insomnia, where he just wasn't getting enough sleep. He was just tired all the time. Again, we can put a link into his story. But what he did was, on how he ended up building this new business, this second successful business called Heights, he looked into why. Why was he suffering from burnout? Why was he suffering from chronic anxiety and stuff like that? And his big one was sleep. And he'd been to therapists, he'd been to he'd sleeping tablets, all that type of stuff. And his new business, Heights, has been derived by him looking at what created his mental health problems. And he's come up with a supplement, effectively, which feeds the brain. Now, obviously, it's just nutritious and it's made up of lots of stuff. And that's what has actually, he sleeps 6 to 7 hours a night. He doesn't have his anxiety anymore to the chronic level. And he's not suffering from burnout. So there's a guy who could have actually just took it, like, why can't I do this? It's not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm too tired. My life is crap. I'm giving up. And he didn't give up. And he actually created a new business by finding out what was going on in his head. So it all comes down to our mind in the end.
Just to be clear, we're not condoning his new supplement that may or may
Not
not
at all.
cause you.
No. Well, now, it has been endorsed by Stephen Fry. But no, we're not. Well, I don't know what it is. I haven't got the research done on it. But it still doesn't matter. He's actually created something from the challenges of pivoting. Do you know what I mean?
Pivoting, like, I suppose, like, that's exactly what it is, isn't it? Pivoting is making that change for the better. And regardless whether it's your own mental health, whether it's your business, whether it's your plan for today, pivoting is a very, very important and useful tool.
Another thing that came up when I was researching it was there was a research done on this COVID and how that's affected specifically businesses. And the reason I found it interesting was that it's found that women entrepreneurs suffered more than male entrepreneurs, and the challenge was it was harder for them to pivot their businesses because of the businesses they were in, and COVID affected their businesses more because of the industry sectors they were based in. So hairdressing, beauty, nails, massage, whatever, do you know what I mean? All of those businesses that shut right down. So it was harder for them then to transition into pivoting to something because of the type of business we're in, although we do know of one who did with the nails. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. We have a new business starting here in SPG. Her name is Maeve, and she is going to have the acrylic nails. It's been all done up. It's really cool. The room is.
It's called
really
Urban Acrylics, isn't it?
Yeah, really cool. And like during her time, like, she pivoted by being able to make the actual false nails that you could clip them on yourself, and she was able to design them, and she kept really busy during the lockdown that way. So it's brilliant the way people do pivot their business. I mean, there's been incredible businesses out there that have, over the COVID have gone online and everything and kept going, and and they will probably have to pivot back afterwards, because not everything is going to stay online, because certain things will and certain things won't. It won't be the same completely, but they probably will have to pivot back, which is, it's like as they say, kind of, it's riding the wave.
Yeah.
You're riding the wave with it, and that's where the pivoting is coming in. And interesting about, I'm going to just kind of chip in there about the lady entrepreneurs, because it's actually fact that by 2030 there will be more lady entrepreneurs than male entrepreneurs
Is that worldwide, is it?
worldwide. Now, COVID has actually put a little bit of a dampener on it, but not enough, because it's still growing at a massive rate, and which is absolutely fantastic. COVID, it wasn't, I would probably say, like, it wasn't just because the female business is a certain sector that they found COVID hard. I think the dynamics of their role at home is different. You're working from home, so suddenly it's not like, daddy's in the office there working. It's kind of, and that's not now saying that that's what happens in every household, but primarily the nurturing and the maternal instinct to look after everybody at home. Everybody was at home, so it wasn't as easy, because they had kids, they have dinners, they have housekeeping, and it kind of got mishmashed in, and there wasn't the idea of being able to go to work. So that was some of the reason why women suffered more during COVID, business wise. So it's an interesting one, but sure.
Jimmy, you were gonna mention something about the book.
Yeah, so there's a guy called a psychologist called Dr. Stephen C. Hayes, and he's reckoned as one of the most cited psychologists, because he's published over 40 books, and he's over 500 plus journal publications in the research field and stuff. So what this book talks about is, just to give you a quick summary of it, is it's talking about us being more aware of where our attention and our energy are focusing. It's then harnessing both negative and positive thoughts to develop more effective patterns of living and behaving, being and doing. And although he notes that it takes time to resolve problems, which we all know, there is no quick fix, which we all know that as well. He has some tools and strategies in the book that allows you to be able to pivot quickly in some circumstances. So it looks like, I haven't read it, it looks like an interesting read from the research we've done in it. It's got great reviews, and it's being promoted by quite a few people. So it's worth checking out. Again, that will be in the show notes on for the podcast, so you'll be able to check that link.
And of course, it is an affiliate link again. So again, another piece of a Twix for us.
Yay!
So we're going to do our top tips. So again, this is a very wide topic. It's not something that, it's not something that we can say, right, A, B, C here, do B and E and F. It's more kind of a general type of thing. But let's just kind of dive through what we've come up with anyway. So the first top tip that we talk about is understanding why you need to pivot. So you talk about this a lot, Jimmy, about the finding your why. So
yeah, what's your why? Yeah.
What's that all about? Or
so again, it goes back to the mind, and it goes back to you being clear, using your awareness of what is going to fulfill you in whatever you're looking for. If it's money, then maybe it's what type of business you want, or maybe you need to change your business. If it's life, what you want to change in your life, where that's going to make you feel. I mean, look, at the end of the day, all the research papers on what is it that people want is, the end goal is they just want to be happy. Now, there's a whole rigmarole as to what happiness is to each individual, but it all comes down to you looking at yourself. So when we're asking what is your why, it's what is it what's meaningful for you, and the reason that you want to do that, whatever it is, whether it's change life direction or change business or start a business or whatever, and then looking at are you doing it for the right reasons, which again comes back to your awareness. Are you doing it for you, or are you doing it for other people, or maybe are you running away from problems that you don't want to deal with, which isn't a good thing either. And then is whatever it is that you're choosing to do or choosing to change or choosing to pivot, is it important enough that it's going to give you motivation to be able to follow through it? So that's what we're talking about. So I suppose effectively what is it to you in regards to all of those things?
Yeah. And we talked about that in multiple different episodes of our podcast. So the one about reinventing yourself, the one about motivation, the one about willpower. There's a lot of common threads here. What is your why is kind of a catchphrase that you've kind of used throughout the series of podcasts that we've done. So the second type of tip, or the second section of our tip section, is what are you pivoting to? And this is kind of like the precursor of making a plan. So if you are going to pivot, like, you don't want to just pivot to any old thing at all. You need to be making a step. You need to be grabbing onto a vine, taking Mars Tarzan economics analogy. You need to be grabbing onto a vine that takes you in a better direction, or at least a direction that will return to your final destination at the end of it. So what are you pivoting to? Entails, first off, doing a risk assessment. So what's the risk of quitting what you're doing? What's the risk of maybe taking a chance at something that's not proven? Or maybe there's a cost, maybe there's a time investment, maybe there's somebody else in your life that suffers as a consequence of you taking this action. So for example, if you've got a family at home and you decide to quit your day job and take up knitting instead, how's that going to affect everybody else? So if you are pivoting, risk assessment is one thing that you're going to have to do. Your research into the various different possible pathways is very important, and doing correct research, not just watching the first YouTube channel or first YouTube video that comes up and saying, okay, that's grand. This guy here says that I'm going to make millions by giving him my bank account details and signing up to his course. Like, you have a responsibility once you are uprooting your life and changing to something else. If you want to be successful, you need to know that the path that you're choosing actually goes somewhere that's along the lines of where you want to be. And built into that, then again, the consequences to your family members or to the people around you. So what are you pivoting to is a big topic in itself, and there's a lot to consider there. The third section of our top tips is all about your plan. Mar, do you want to talk about this? Or
Yeah, your plan. I mean, that comes up in in every subject that we talk about. You've got to have a plan of action, and that part of that is building a team around you. So again, when you talk about in the last one how it affects everybody, it's kind of bringing all these people in so that they actually understand why you're doing it, how you can help, how you what you want to achieve, and how everybody is going to help, and how everybody is going to be benefited in the long run. If you're in a business, in a company, I'm sure every company sits down, and if they have all their employees rolled on behind them, then that makes the change very good. If we're in the gym here, when everyone believes in our dream, then that sells what we have here. So that's really why the plan and the team are very, very important. That you start goal setting so that you're going to make set out what you hope to achieve from this pivot. What is it the goal is, and then that you're accountable for it. Yep. So it applies everywhere, to the smallest little thing to actually multinational businesses pivoting.
Yeah. So we had a whole section or a whole podcast as well on goal setting and becoming accountable, and you talked about your accountability mirror as well, Mar, and being able to set up different goals and stuff like that, and being able to track them. Very important. So, like, if anybody is having a midlife crisis or a quarter life crisis, and you want to go off and change your whole life, definitely it's worth going back on a few of our previous podcast episodes, which of course you can get at www.fcpgm.com, or full back catalogue of over 30 episodes now this stage. But yeah, so just to recap on top tips, why do you need to pivot is number 1. What are you pivoting to is number 2. And then number 3 is your plan of action. So maybe that helps. Maybe it doesn't. I'm not sure. Does that help you?
Well, definitely. I think it would be great to get a bit of feedback if anybody has any feedback, or maybe somebody has pivoted and successfully or unsuccessfully. That's fine too, because there's a lesson on both sides.
Yeah.
Well, if you do have feedback, or if you do want to comment, the best place to comment is actually on our Facebook our Facebook community page, which you can just search up. Just type in FCPGM on Facebook, and there's a community there that you can join. There's a question just to filter out all the mad people, but it's easy enough if you're not mad to answer and get in there. And if you have an example of somebody who has pivoted that maybe we didn't talk about today, maybe just pop it in there and start up a discussion. We'd love to hear from you. Mar, have you got a quote for us?
I do indeed, and my quote this week is from an Irish playwright. He was famous. He was into politics, and he influenced culture, theatre. He actually wrote the play Pygmalion, which later became My Fair Lady.
Okay.
Which were all my favourite actresses. Yeah, and he actually co-founded the School of Economics. Of course, I'm talking about the great playwright George Bernard Shaw. He actually won a Nobel Prize for literature, and his quote is, I think it's actually very applicable to today's topic, and the quote goes, "Progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything."
Cool. Yep, so that pretty much sums up everything that we've talked about anyway. So, just before we sign off, if listeners want to get in touch with you, Mar, where are they going to get you?
You're going to get me on my Insta page, Marlene Griffin _SBG_Cork.
Jimmy?
Be able to contact me on Facebook. Just type in API Clinic with no S.
With no S. That's a change from last season. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm at Liam OG Griffin on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And anything to do with the podcast, if you want back catalogue episodes, if you want show notes, if you want references, if you want affiliate links, go to www.fcpgm.com. That's the Fight Coach, the Psychotherapist, and the Gym Momma, fcpgm.com. That has been our show, guys. So hopefully you've enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends and enemies, and we will see you all next week. Good luck.